Hi, I'm Jennifer. Nice to meet you. Before I tell you my story, kindly tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I like to know where you're from. Now let's dive in. It started as humiliations often do in a crowded conference room with bad coffee. I was hunched over the office printer, wrestling with yet another paper jam, when my father announced to the board, "Don't worry about Jennifer. She's just here to help with the tech stuff." I froze. Not because of the jab, I was used to those, but because on the projector screen behind him was my creation. Eduysync. The interface, the color palette, even the student dashboard I'd spent weeks perfecting, all flashing under the title, developed by James and Richard Palmer. James, my brother. Richard, my father. Not a single mention of me. Jennifer, can you hurry with that? Dad's voice cut through my thoughts. I smiled tightly, pressing the green button to spit out their precious contracts. For 2 years I'd worked in the shadows, testing prototypes, sitting up at 2 a.m. tweaking the code until my eyes burned. I believed if the product succeeded I'd finally earn their respect. Instead they'd written me out before the ink had even dried. That night, while everyone else celebrated in the conference lounge, I sat alone at my desk. My hands hovered over my laptop, opening the archived version of Eduysync from the very first day I named it. I had proof. Every early commit, every design mock-up. But proof was worthless if no one cared to see it. I thought about confronting them. I imagined slamming a folder down in the middle of their champagne toasts. But Dad would just lean back, sip his drink, and tell me I was being emotional. No, if I was going to win, I had to be strategic. The first step came the following Monday. I quietly requested administrator access to the Eduysync server for testing. Then I started compiling everything. The original code commits tied to my username, time-stamped emails where I'd pitched the very features now being called innovative by my brother, even a voice memo where James had admitted, "I don't get the UI thing. Jen's the one who made it usable." Still, every time I walked into a meeting, my role was reduced to tech support. My father would glance at me only when something broke, like I was a living troubleshooting manual. The breaking point came at the Palmer family reunion 2 weeks later. Standing under fairy lights in my parents' backyard, my uncle slapped my brother on the back. "James, you're going to change education forever." My brother smirked, glancing at me. "We're already doing it." That's when I knew, they weren't just ignoring me, they were building a history without me in it. And if I didn't move fast, one day Eduysync would be a global success, and I'd be nothing more than a forgotten printer fixer in the footnotes. I left the reunion early. Driving home, the summer air thick with the smell of cut grass, I began planning my counterattack. It wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be emotional. It would be undeniable. I wasn't just going to reclaim Eduysync. I was going to make them say my name. I didn't sleep much after the reunion. While the rest of the family dreamed in their big houses with their engraved crystal trophies, I sat on my couch with my laptop glowing like a lighthouse in a storm. I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was embedding myself in the system, the very one they thought they controlled. Edusync's backend was familiar to me in a way that only its creator could understand. The variables I'd named after my favorite childhood books. The quirky shortcuts only I knew. They were like fingerprints, invisible to the untrained eye, but impossible to erase without tearing the whole thing apart. I created a private encrypted repository, a mirror of the live platform, with every piece of data tied directly to me. And then, like a ghost slipping into someone's home, I started leaving little signatures in the live system. A line of dormant code here, a commented note there. Not obvious. But when you knew where to look, they all spelled one thing. Jennifer Palmer was here first. At work, nothing changed on the surface. My father barked orders during meetings. My brother took credit for breakthrough updates. But now, every time they showcased a new feature, I smiled to myself because I knew I'd planted the seed that would one day prove it was mine. My chance to test my approach came sooner than expected. Troop Edu Tech, a billion-dollar education giant, requested a demo. They were interested in acquiring James and Richard's company. The meeting would be in 3 weeks. That was my deadline. I didn't want to just confront them in front of Troop. That would make me look like an unhinged relative with a grudge. No, I needed something airtight. A presentation so undeniable that the room would have no choice but to acknowledge me. But first I needed allies. I reached out to Marissa, a former colleague from my brief stint at a startup before joining my family's company. She'd seen me sketch the first Eduysync layout on a napkin. Over coffee I told her everything. She didn't even blink before saying, "Jen, I'll testify. And I still have the email you sent me with the prototype link." That night I added her to my growing file of witnesses and documentation. But I also knew I couldn't trust only the past. I needed to create something in the present, something that showed I was still the engine driving Eduysync forward. So I built a new module, quietly after hours. A powerful analytics dashboard that could predict student performance trends weeks in advance. When it was ready, I released it into the live product without announcing it. Within days, clients were raving about it in support tickets. And of course, in the next meeting, my brother said, "Glad you all love the new analytics feature. Took me a while to crack it, but..." I didn't even flinch. I just typed "noted" in my private log. They were digging their own trap and they didn't even know it. The night before the troop meeting, I printed my dossier, timelines, code screenshots, witness statements, and a simple, devastating chart showing the overlap between my original designs and the current platform. I slipped it into my bag and told myself, tomorrow they find out who really built this empire. The Troop Edu Tech headquarters felt like stepping into the future. Glass walls, polished chrome, screens tracking global education metrics in real time. I walked in with my father and brother, my bag slung over my shoulder, my dossier tucked inside like a concealed weapon. "Let me do the talking," my father whispered as we approached the boardroom. He didn't even glance at me. Inside, a panel of executives greeted us. The Troop CEO, a tall woman with sharp eyes named Evelyn Park, gestured for us to sit. He got straight to the point. "We've been following Edusync's trajectory. The adaptability of the platform is unmatched." He smiled at James. "You must be proud of what you've built." I felt my jaw tighten. James leaned back in his chair. "It's been a team effort, of course." He paused, a calculated pause, then added, "But the vision, the real breakthroughs, that was Dad and me." The words burned. My hand brushed against the edge of my dossier inside the bag. The meeting rolled on. My father pitched expansion strategies. James showed off the analytics dashboard I had built in secret, passing it off as his latest innovation. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully, asking about the coding architecture. James stumbled over his answer. "Actually," I said before I could stop myself, "the analytics engine is built on a predictive model I designed." My father's hand clamped down on my arm under the table. "Jennifer," he said smoothly, "why don't you let us handle the technical details?" I swallowed the urge to push back right there. Not yet. If I blew up now, I'd be the problem, not the solution. When the meeting adjourned for a coffee break, Evelyn lingered behind. She glanced at me as the others filed out. "You know," she said quietly, "I read some of the early Eduysync code when we were vetting you. There's a signature to it. I've seen similar work before." My heart pounded. "Where?" She smiled faintly. "From a developer named Jennifer Palmer. Worked on a project at a startup 5 years ago. Marissa." She told them. Before I could answer, my father and brother returned, cheerful and loud. Evelyn didn't mention it, but her eyes told me she knew. By the end of the meeting, Troop offered a conditional acquisition deal, conditional on a full due diligence review of Edusync's intellectual property. My father shook their hands like he'd just won the lottery. I knew better. That review would either cement my erasure, or finally make my name unavoidable. Back in the car, James was practically glowing. "Troop's going to pay millions for this. We'll finally be playing in the big leagues." "We," I said softly. "Of course," he laughed. "Your family. You'll always have a place here." A place. The same corner they'd been keeping me in for years. When I got home, I locked my door and opened my encrypted files. If Troop was doing due diligence, I was going to make sure the trail they followed led right to me. I began curating a package, not just the code but the story. Emails, memos, time-stamped prototypes. The human fingerprints no one could fake. I knew there was a chance my family would see this as betrayal. But what they'd done to me for years. That was betrayal wearing a smile. Troop's review would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks for the truth to rise to the surface, or be buried forever. The first sign that things were shifting came in the form of a late-night text from my father. "Troop wants you to meet with their tech audit team. Tomorrow. Don't overcomplicate it." Translation: Don't tell them anything they don't already believe. The next morning I walked into the Troop offices alone. The tech audit team was 3 people. 2 engineers and a legal counsel with a voice like she'd been chewing ice her whole life. They slid a laptop across the table. "Walk us through the architecture," one of the engineers said. "We want to understand how Eduysync evolved from its earliest prototype." This was it. My moment. I pulled up the earliest commit logs, the ones from my personal laptop before the family even registered the company. Every line of code was tagged with my developer handle, JP_under. I showed them the first design mockups, my hand-sketched wireframes scanned into PDFs, the beta test emails I'd sent to Marissa and 2 other colleagues years ago. The legal counsel leaned forward. "So you're saying you authored the original platform?" "I'm not saying it," I replied. "The timestamps are." They kept me there for 3 hours, drilling down into the code, the user experience decisions, even the naming conventions buried in the database. By the end, the lead engineer was grinning like a kid who'd just solved a puzzle. "That's pretty definitive," he said. "I don't see how anyone could replicate this history without being the person who built it." When I got home that evening, my father was waiting in my driveway. His face was tight. "What the hell did you tell them?" "The truth," I said. "Jennifer, you don't understand." "No, Dad. I understand perfectly. You're scared they'll figure out I built Eduysync before you and James even believed it could work." His jaw flexed. "You think this will end well for you? You're going to make us look like liars." I stared him down. "Maybe you should have thought about that before erasing me." He left without another word. 2 days later I got an email, not from my family but from Troop's legal department. "For the purposes of the acquisition review, we will require full documentation of Ms. Jennifer Palmer's role in the creation and development of the Eduysync platform. Please prepare a statement and supporting evidence." They'd copied my father and brother on the email. That evening James called me. His voice was sharp, panicked. "Jen, why are you doing this? We're on the same side." "Are we?" "Because from where I'm standing, you've spent years taking credit for my work." He went quiet, then tried a different angle. "If you blow this up, Troop might walk away. We could lose everything." I almost laughed. You mean you could lose everything?" When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear but from the adrenaline of finally standing my ground. A week into the review I started hearing rumors. The Troop team had begun cross-checking my documentation with internal company records. And every time they pulled a thread, my father's and brother's version of events started to fray. Still, I knew them well enough to realize they wouldn't just roll over. If they felt cornered, they'd fight dirty. And the closer we got to Troop's final decision, the more I could feel the tension building, like a storm I'd been waiting my whole life to face. The morning of Troop's final review, the air felt heavier, like the city itself knew something was about to break. We were all called into the same boardroom. Me, my father, my brother, and the Troop acquisition team. Evelyn Park sat at the head of the table, a folder in front of her, her expression unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We've completed our due diligence, and there are findings we need to discuss before moving forward." My father jumped in, smiling the way people do when they think they can charm their way out of anything. "I'm sure we can clear up any confusion." Evelyn raised a hand. "There's no confusion." She opened the folder and began laying out printed pages. Commit logs, email chains, prototype screenshots. My prototype screenshots. Our technical review has established that the core architecture of Eduysync, its original design, and most of its foundational features were created by Jennifer Palmer before the company was formally incorporated. We've also confirmed that multiple internal documents omitted or misattributed her role. Silence. The kind that presses on your ears. My father's smile faltered. James leaned forward, eyes darting between the documents like he could will them to rearrange themselves. "This is being taken out of context," James said. "No," Evelyn replied, "this is the context. And given these findings, any acquisition deal will require that Ms. Palmer be formally recognized as the founder and majority intellectual property holder of Eduysync." It was the first time I'd ever seen my father at a loss for words. Troop's legal counsel slid a revised term sheet across the table. My name at the top, my ownership stake clearly outlined. I didn't move to touch it. "Not yet. Jennifer," Evelyn said, turning to me, This deal will make Eduysync part of Troop's global platform. But more importantly, it will give you the resources to keep building. We believe in your vision. I glanced at my father. His jaw was locked, his knuckles white against the table. James wouldn't even look at me. Fine, my father said finally, each word like a pebble dropped into a still pond. If that's what it takes. I signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like I was writing the last line of a chapter I'd been stuck in for years. After the meeting, James caught up to me in the hallway. You could have handled this quietly, he said. I met his eyes. You could have handled it honestly. By the end of the week, Troop's press release went live. Troop EduTech acquires Eduysync. Founder Jennifer Palmer to lead global development. The word founder hit me like a lifeline thrown to someone who'd been treading water too long. My father didn't call. James sent a single text. Congrats. I didn't reply. The following month, I stood on a stage at an education conference, presenting Edusync's next phase. My badge didn't say support staff or tech lead. It said founder and vision director. And as I looked out over the crowd, I thought about every developer, every innovator, every ghost founder who'd been erased from their own story. I promised myself I wouldn't just keep building technology. I'd build pathways so no one else would have to fight this hard just to be seen. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my story, don't forget to like and hit subscribe. You will also enjoy other stories on AJ Family Drama. Until next time, bye.